Welcome to my course, Game Development Basics, Week 7, Lesson 6, Implementing Save Variables. And one of the things that we actually haven't done yet that I've been meaning to do is implement a level completion event. Now, this is going to become more important for the remainder of this week, as we're going to be adding a lot of functionality to when the player completes a level. But to get us started, I just want to create a really simple and quick implementation. So here I am in my project, and just to show you how this works, I've set it up so that my boss only has 10 health so that it can be destroyed very quickly. And there, when I destroy it, it destroyed all of the enemies in the world, all the projectiles. I can still move the player's ship around and fire the weapons, and then I'll be able to return to the main menu. And most of this shouldn't be anything new, so I'll just walk you through everything really quickly. The first thing I noticed is that we also didn't really have a game over event. So here in our player camera, when the ship is destroyed and there are no more ships remaining, we had some functionality here. I cut all of this out and made a new function called game over on the game mode, because I think the game mode is what should be handling this functionality. And this is what was there previously. I just added a couple more things at the end. The first thing was I cleared the timer that's updating the gameplay timer. And this was just incrementing an integer to keep track of how long the player was playing the game. So I want to clear that so that that timer stops, and that would give us the total time that the player was playing. I also added that we're going to remove the HUD from the screen so that there's only one UI showing. And then here in my BP boss, I copied this any damage event from our enemy base. And the only difference is that when this boss dies, I want to cast to BP game mode and call level complete. And here in level complete, we're going to clear that timer. We're going to destroy all remaining enemies, which is going to get all actors of class of enemy base and destroy them, and then get all actors of class of enemy projectile and destroy those as well. The next thing I'm doing is showing my mouse cursor and creating a widget for level complete. And I'm setting my input mode to game and UI and focusing on this widget, and then I destroy the HUD. So all of that should have been fairly straightforward. If you have any questions, please feel free to put something in the comments, or you can ask me on my public Discord. And now that that's working, let's go ahead and set up some additional variables. So in this lesson, I'm going to create a few new variables on our SaveGame class. And the first two, we're going to go through some implementations for those. But I also want to create some additional variables now that we're going to use in future lessons this week. In lesson 7, we're going to create a system for unlocking ships and weapons. I think it's good to get these variables set up now while we're doing the others. And then in lesson 9, we're going to set up a system for unlocking new levels when a level is completed. So I'll go ahead and set up that variable as well. But for this lesson, we want to implement some way of tracking the currency that the player currently has. And then I also want to create a variable to track what is the equipped weapon that the player is going to start each level with. And if you remember, we set up our BP bank on our player camera class. And this is what the player can use to purchase upgrades while they're playing the game. I'd also like this to be able to be used in the menu screens to purchase upgrades for the ship as well. So I'd like this to be a variable that can be passed around between levels. So I'm going to create another variable on my game instance class to track our currency. And I think it would be fun that at the end of the level, whatever currency the player hasn't used will be added to this. So here on my game mode, I'm going to create a new function, and I'm going to call this collect remaining currency. And I'm going to call this at the end of my level complete. What I want to do here is say get actor of class, a player camera, and then we'll get access to our BP bank and then the currency. And then the next thing I want to do is get my game instance, get my available currency, and then add this currency to that, and then set that to the new currency. And just to show this is working, I want to go to my ship select screen. I'm going to add some new text here. And there we see that I added 100 currency to my available currency, even though it started at 0. So we know this is working now. But I may be able to want to do this in other places. So I'm going to cut all of this and I'll just make a new function on my game instance. And then I'm also going to duplicate this and call this subtract currency. And now I have two functions on my game instance, one to add currency and one to subtract currency. And so here I will just add currency instead, and we'll pass this in. But I'd also like it that whenever the player gains new currency or subtracts it, that we save this to our save game. So let's create another variable on our SaveGame class called currency. And then we'll create some functionality to save that currency to the save game. And all of this, let's collapse to a function. I'm going to call this save currency. And this way we could just add it to our add currency as well. And the last thing we want to do is load that whenever we load in the game. And every time we create a new variable, we're going to need to add this to the game instance. So what I'd actually like to do is take all of this and collapse it to a function and say load starting variables. And this way, every time we have a new variable that we want to load, we can just add it to this function. So now this is working. So next, let's create the variable for our equipped weapon. And whenever we do one of these, what I like to do is just start by creating the variable in our game instance and then creating the variable in our save game. And here in our player ship, we have this weapon array and we set it up to always start with one weapon there. And if we change this to something like the power cannon, then this is what our player will then start with. And right after begin play is when we spawn these weapons. But it's an array, which means in order to pass this in as an instance editable variable, we need to make sure it's the same type. As you can see here, when we're spawning the ship, I made it instance editable and it's showing up as an array. So this means that it needs to be the same on our game instance and our save game file. And in the next lesson, we'll set this up to be settable on our ship select screen, but for right now, let's just get it working. So here on my player camera, in this spawn ship event, we're already gaining access to the game instance so that we can spawn the selected ship. So all we need to do here is get a reference to our starting weapon and then pass that into here. And now if we set it to something different on our game instance, we'll spawn with that weapon. So let's get that here, and we'll also set it here in our function where we're loading the starting variables. And in the next lesson, we'll set up saving these variables, but for right now, we know we're just loading it from whatever it was saved in our SaveGame class. So really quickly, let's just set up the remaining 3 variables. And this will be a little bit of a mini challenge for you to see if you can figure out what the correct variable type for each of these should be. We want a variable for unlocked ships. We want a variable for unlocked weapons that the player can choose between at the ship select screen. And then we want a variable that'll keep track of all of the levels that we've unlocked. If you want to attempt this challenge on your own, you can pause the video now. Otherwise, I'll set these up really quickly and you can follow along. So hopefully you were able to attempt that challenge or follow along with me. And just real quick, I'll show you that we have unlocked weapons, which will be a weapon base reference as an array. Unlocked ships, which will be of type BP player ship, and that's an array. And then unlocked levels, which will be an array of names. And the reason for that is because when we want to open a level, we need to pass in the name of that level so that we can open it. So now that we have all that set up, in the next lesson, we're going to set up a behavior for unlocking new ships and weapons when a player completes a level. So I'll see you in the next lesson.